Dobro večer. Good evening, good night. Nice to have you here for book launch in a form of a conversation of our guest Diedrich Diederichsen from Berlin and myself, Petar Milat from Zagreb. Also glad that we had the opportunity to come together for the two of us after 11 years. Last time we met in Zagreb at Mama. But the occasion that caused us to come here all together is, of course, and they are really extremely happy that the book of Diedrich's Aesthetics of Pop Music had been translated and published in Macedonian. And so this makes it really to lay my cards open. I was socialized in with Diedrich having as one of my intellectual idols and heroes. So this makes it. I'm also in I get sentimental about it. Okay, maybe just for some of you who don't know who Diedrich Diederichsen is, I would say that foremost Diedrich is a writer. I would say writer, emphatically, theorist, and from recently a former professor at Merz Academy in Stuttgart, where Diedrich was in the 90s and in early 2000s, and recently he retired from the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. Diedrich is also author of, if I counted the right way, of 18 books in German. 18 books in German. I say it because there are not too many, I would say. Not too many translations had been, or at least so far, in the hegemonic language we live in. This is English. And Aesthetics of Pop Music is also, I would say, in a way, the first proper English publication by Diedrich. But one nice thing about you, if you would like to know something about Diedrich Diederichsen, Diedrich has a wonderful website, which is also very regularly updated. It's Diedrichsen.de, Deutschland, where you could see quite many links also of his many journal and magazine contributions are online. Now coming and I will now tell it in German, to Diedrich's Stellung, position in German-speaking countries, I would say without exaggerating that since the late 80s until today, Diedrich is for sure one of the most influential German language intellectuals, and it was partly at the beginning also due to his engagement with the magazine Spex, but not exclusively, and I would say also with his other activities, prolific and quite, you come around, you know people and they know you, so that Diedrich's Stellung in German-speaking world is, I would say, it says something, maybe it's not too intimate to say, that most people then, if they say in German-speaking countries Diedrich, actually they mean you. So there is no other Diedrich. Yeah. As I said, Aesthetics of Pop Music is his first proper book in English, though you have published quite a lot in magazines and influential English-speaking, not only English-speaking magazines, but the first book properly out, and Aesthetics of Pop Music was put out by Polity Press 2 years ago. And our Macedonian translation of Contrapunkten is among the first translations of the book. That said, thank you for being here, and also I would also thank our friends from the Goethe, colleagues from the Goethe Institute who supported Diedrich's visit to Macedonia. To open our evening, I'll try to do, as my introduction, to do spoilers. So, to do spoilers. I don't know how many of you have read the book. It came out last year in Macedonian. How many of you have read it? But I will do a couple of spoilers. So just maybe to locate what I would say could be a starting point for our conversation. A, and this is something I quote now Diedrich. The chief mission of this book is to separate the concept of pop music from the concept of music. So I would say this is the general intention of the book. If you would like to have the chief mission. B, this book covers a historical period of some 60 years, plus minus. So let's say from the mid-1950s to the 2010s, or even today, Diedrich will say, from manned flight from the space age, NASA, to emergence of Web 2.0. C. Diedrich's approach is informed, as he says, by the Frankfurt School style of critical theory, one. Second would be media theory, German media theory most prominently by late Friedrich Kittler. And then see some parts or some also aspects of Nicholas Luhmann's system theory and Stuart Hall's cultural studies. D, and now comes the part where I would say really makes it great. And this is a spoiler. So early in the book, Diedrich says, and I paraphrase it, pop music is a specific mode of relation to the real world. It has an indexical relation to the world. And this indexical, we will talk about. Indexical, I would also maybe say non-conceptual or bodily relation to the world, pop music. So non-conceptual, somatic or bodily, and indexical. And you will now, Diedrich and you will excuse me, I'm a former philosopher in a way. So my socialization was philosophy. I had a sense of reading the book, and this, I would say, makes it really interesting, and I would say also amazing. The series that the book has been published is called Theory Redux by Polity Press, and actually now pretty much everybody of importance publishes their books in English. But Diedrich's book is in as much amazing as if within those 18 books I told that you have published since the early 80s, one stands out, I would say, until now as a magnum opus. This would be a book from 2014. It's called Über Popmusik, on pop music. Sometime 500 pages, large format book. And then the book from published last year, your collected essays and writings from the 21st century, and the wonderful title of the book is 21st Century. And 21st Century is about 1,000 pages long, so I have it here on the tablet, but it's big, it's huge. And you know what I would say? So, what is so interesting about this book? Not just that it came out in another language, English, not German, but also it is a book of abbreviations. It is abbreviated. It is incredibly condensed, compact. And then, I thought, okay, so this is condensed, compact. It is sometimes, if you have this kind of theoretical background or cultural background, it is easy to come. Sometimes, if you don't, maybe probably it will be opaque or dense. But then I thought, and this thing I told already, that pop music is a specific mode of relation to the real world. There's a book by, some of you have read maybe Hegel's Encyclopedia of Philosophical Science. It's 1830. And there Hegel says in his foreword, so this was the last edition of the encyclopedia. As you will know, encyclopedia of Hegel's, this is just, everything is abbreviated. You just have kind of statements after statements after statements. So there is no relaxation with it. So it's very, very dense. Hegel opens the book with a chapter or something which he calls 3 modes of conceptual relation to the world. Drei Stellungen des Gedankens zur Objektivität. You know, I would say, yeah, an analogy again, not exaggerating. The book you've written, and that's now available also in Macedonian, somehow deals what it would mean to construe non-conceptual modes of relation to a world. So in a way theoretical, but non-conceptual, or maybe even bodily, or whatever. I mean, this will be our point. So in a way, yeah, I would say, in a way, I mean, this Hegel published his encyclopedia, he was already some 60 years old. The book came out, you are also now 60 plus. Okay, so this is my analogy, and please, if it's too intimate, I apologize already. Okay, and now to come to you, finally. I had the idea, maybe is just as a concept, to try somehow more to give kind of a cues, also in a musical sense, to Diedrich, less in a format of questions, because again, the book itself, the format of it, the encyclopedic, the dense, the condensed, the compact form makes it really difficult, I mean, to get, because it's just we tackle one issue, then we open all the others. Rather, in a way, to go just with a cue-like thing. Mm-hmm. I give you a cue, then somehow you try to respond, okay. So let's see how it functions. But for the first, I would nevertheless start with two maybe more of a biographical questions. Twofold. If you could please tell us something about your formative musical experiences, and then secondly, about your interest to write about music.
Yeah, I should start with thanking people, like especially you for this great introduction, but also people who brought me here from Kontrapunkt and from Goethe and so on. That was really an honor, and really enjoyed it so far, and also this great introduction that raised many issues already, and the formative. Well, I could talk about the formative influence, the formative moments with music on a level of what were the first songs I was hearing, or what was the first time a melody that I remembered. But I would prefer to tell it differently. When I grew up in the household of my parents, there was no record player. There was also no TV, but that was normal at the time. That in '63, '64, when I was 6 years old, there was many households that had no TV, but most households had these. What was called in German Musiktruhe, which was like a piece of furniture that had a radio and the record player, and those were widespread. But we didn't have that. We just had a radio, and there was a show on radio, a program every Saturday, I guess. Yeah, Saturday around 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and that would be just like the charts, and there I could hear the Beatles, and the Beatles I wanted to hear, but not only the Beatles. But I was 6 years old, and the question that I had were, where were the Beatles? Where would they physically exist? And nobody really explained it to me, how the music came out of that box. But I was already old enough to know that they're not little people. And I knew that there were people singing, or there were people making some noises. So I had to know where they are. And that is the main question, I think, still today. And that is also the main question of the book. Where are they? And how are they there where they are when you hear them on the radio or some other media technology? And then I was told that the radio program is produced. Well, my grandparents went with me to the zoo, and the zoo was next to a strange building, and that building, I was told, this is where the radio program is produced. And so I was I was not so much interested in the elephants anymore, but I wanted to know, are the Beatles inside? And I knew they were from Liverpool. That's something I knew. And there was a soccer game, a football game between a German team and Liverpool, and everyone was supporting the German team. I said, no, of course you have to support Liverpool, and so on. And then my grandparents had a TV around the same year, and I went watching TV for the first time, and it was a show on Saturday evening, and the moderator was saying something, and now we have a band singing from Liverpool here, and I knew that the TV station was at the same spot where the radio station was, and I thought the Beatles coming. But it was a big disappointment. It was not the Beatles. It was some other of these hundreds of bands that existed. Of course, this stupid Hamburg radio station or TV station could not afford the Beatles. But it was like, so they were not there. And that's basically the main question. Where are they? And I think that, there is a story that is told in one of in Lou Reed's song Rock and Roll, where he's talking about how his life as a kid is completely boring and dull, and one fine morning I put on a radio station, I couldn't believe what I heard at all. They played this fine music, so that was also the same kind of experience that life gets a totally different meaning if to get this broadcast from somewhere, if you get a message from somewhere. And this, I think, this communicative broadcast aspect is far more important than the chord changes. But the chord changes are not contingent. The chord changes are important, but they are not the achievement. You're not listening to it because of the chord changes, but you're listening to it because of the promise of this communication with someone who cannot be really traced. But you know there's a trace. The trace is the music. So yeah, that was the formative influence, but it took me a long time to realize that this is the formative influence, because of course, like everyone else, I was misguided by the ideology of music, that it is somehow in the music where I would have to look for things, and that the music was either brilliant or dull, and it took me a while to realize that that the music is only an aspect of this communication. And for that, it was helpful one thing that was helpful was, I saw it once, I don't know, when I was 20, 21 or something, I saw a TV film about children getting manipulated by supermarkets, how supermarkets try to influence children. And by like making them putting pressure on the parents to buy things, by putting them next to the cashier and their chocolates and so on. But it was, and then they interviewed these kids, and these kids were only talking about the noises they would hear. They were totally fascinated by the noise of the cashier, and they were electronic noises and so on. And it was obvious that this was like 4-year-olds or something. They were hearing something. They got a signal, they got a message from somewhere, and at that time there was also like Kraftwerk and early electronic pop music became widespread, and it was so clear that it is the message of this electronic communication that reached them, not the message, the channel, and. Yeah, and so this was one hint. Another one was Klaus Teweleit was once writing something that I also read when I was under 20 in the journal Film Critic, which was a great cinematographic journal in the German 70s and early 80s on early rock and roll, how he had become like addicted to early rock and roll, and he also quotes he also mentions these kind of signature sounds. He doesn't call it them. I later called them signature sounds, and I think they also play a certain part in the social function of pop music. But like just the glissando on the piano and Jerry Lee Lewis, or the certain howling saxophone. So just key sounds that trigger something, and where it's important that it's not clear what they trigger, but they are so triggering, and I think that this is exactly also for the formation of so-called youth cultural tribes. It's important to have these kind of signature sounds because they function like a totem, yeah. So these were important influences for my writing on this. Mm-hmm. But I have to say, like I said before, it took a while till this media aspect became more central. It wasn't always there.
Mm. Thank you. Let's say open up now the book in a way, and it is again, as I told, these abbreviations make it in a way is a constant attempt in the book to somehow encircle, to try to redefine what pop music would be or is not. But probably the most important definition you give in a book, which in a way carries the structure of it, is that pop music is a form of indexical art.
Yeah.
So could you elaborate on it?
Well, I mean, first, indexical art is something that is strictly thinking about it not possible, because the attractiveness of the indexical signal follows the rules of what Roland Barthes calls the punctum in photography. So photography is a similar discipline. It's also like recording based, and as Roland Barthes explains it, the attractiveness of the punctum is something that is produced by the beholder, by the viewer, and it is not something that can be intentionally created by the photographer. It's something that touches you. He even says it goes into your body. It drills a hole into your body, like a punctum as a hole. But it's not. It cannot be planned. So, in following Barthes, this cannot be the result of an artistic production. And I argue that no, it just cannot be produced, but it can be. You can produce the conditions that make it more likely to happen, and on different levels. You can do it in the studio when you produce a record. You can make that likely to happen, and you can, by using certain technology. The microphone is perfect for that, because the microphone constantly transmits I wouldn't say errors or failures, but like uneven moments of singing, where the singing becomes limited, or where the vocalist would meet certain wouldn't be sing well enough. The history of pop music is the history of small uneducated voices of people like Bob Dylan or Ray Davies, who can't really sing. They have a very small repertoire, so this would be a second possibility. And then also on a performative level, it is producing a form of music in which you are not so much absorbed by music making. It's not about playing so well or playing so complex or inspired, but by developing a form of music in which you become semi-passive, semi-active, where you are, this is what Craig Owens calls posing, where you are waiting for something to happen. But you're playing something on the guitar, and so you are involved with something, you are doing something, but you do not step forward with it. So you're waiting for the audience to see you in your whole cool attractiveness, which is not showing ambition. But of course, this is not the only way. There are other ways, by being overambitious, by being kind of overactive, or by the interplay between these different performative positions. So all these strategies, be it on a recording, in the recording process or in the performance process, participate in producing the ideal opportunity for punctum-like effects. But at the same time, pop music does not work only on the audio level. It is always connected with a video from the beginning on, and this is part of the definition in this book and in other books, that there need to be visuals around. They do not have to be, and they're not in the same channel mostly. Later in music videos they joined in the same channel, but initially they are somewhere else. They are on the cover of a magazine, on the cover of an album, or they are, you have seen a face on TV, and so. But it's basically it's the audience, the listener, who puts these together, visual informations, the audio information, and then social information, like the place where you find it, where you run into it. So there is no object in pop music that is like the object of pop music, but that you can look at and say, well, this is it, and it has this pros and this cons, and but it's basically something that the viewer, listener, person composes themselves, that they have to put together. Yeah.
Links. That it links the user or the recipient.
The recipient has to connect these different channels. It's not only the ones I mentioned. There's even some more, but let's not get too complicated. Yes, yeah, and that is really important. There is no. If you compare, for example, with cinema, basically the way how a moving image, a projection, a dark room, the order of sitting in a cinema is organized is contingent. It could have been otherwise, and in some moments was I don't know. In the early days of cinema, other options were around or were possible, but it had become this cinema, and so there is a tradition of how to put things together, and there's a technology and there's an architecture, and this does not exist in pop music. You do not have the equivalent of a cinema.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, this is the interesting part in a sense of you speak, and you also have you are referencing Adorno, telling that the status of music has changed dramatically with the reproduction of recording, being recorded, and as we know, and the famous or notorious debate of not very, inimical debate between Walter Benjamin after he has published his famous essays on the arts in the age of mechanical reproducibility, and then Adorno replying to him with a text on the fetishism of listening, that somehow, if I think it through also with the references of German media theory from post-World War, especially Kittler, but also then the media theories we know, other ones, is that the thing that the apparatus, if you think, for example, cinema, would be I guess, probably example of apparatus, okay, or assemblage of cinema. Of course, it is not just technical. You have also, of course, the users, the producers, and so on. But you say, and in as much as to make pop music distinct to, for example, to cinema, is that the apparatus of pop music is nothing technological, but as you say, a shifting social world.
Right, right.
That this is the apparatus of pop music, social world.
It's actually, I would say, even movement, no? Social movement. It's movement through a social order, and by being that, by being a movement through social order. Because, I mean, my other example is always the wave, the listening situation bedroom versus the listening situation bar. And if you are really touched by a song or by the recorded person, the recorded body, and you are first touched in a bedroom situation at home alone, and the second time this happens in a bar, this constructs a connection between these two social spots through that song, and you are the one who has been carrying the sentiment from one place to the other. And this is connected, of course, with the fact that people who are spoken to in that way, who are sensitive to that and who are become like fans or of that kind of culture, become aware of that they are transporting this, that they are kind of reconstructing through repetition of these movements this social apparatus. They are wearing certain clothes, they are having certain hairstyles that make them recognizable as those who carry these listening experiences from one social spot to another. And so yes, this is a historical situation. I'm not saying it works like this anymore, but it's still I think it's still the key, the unspoken maybe still the matrix that people believe it is organized by, although one could doubt it in the digital age, and where everything tends to become one channel again.
So in the various ways you try to define what pop music is, for example, I will quote now kind of a oscillation what pop music could be, in a sense. For example, at one point at the very beginning you say pop music is in large part what in China is known as behavior art. The art of conducting oneself in a public setting. So this would be kind of a specific conformity or performative conformity. Then on the other side you say, let's say, describing Bo Diddley, for sure one of your, I guess, your musical heroes, you say that the true self of the pop music is, and then you say, a persona, totally fabricated, and then someone very specific.
Yeah.
So there's this kind of oscillation in between some kind of weird conformism and then also some kind of weird or queer divergence.
Yeah, I mean it's the performance tradition to, if you are minority or if you are from an emergent stratum of culture or society or art form, the more you are that, the more you are minor, the more you have to produce some kind of persona, some kind of, and on the other hand, you're only doing that in order to be recognized for your for the non-constructed part, or at least, or not necessarily. It is of course a mysticism that you can really be recognized at that, but this has to be in the air as a possibility that the real person is hidden by the persona, and that there is a tension between the two, and the viewer is kind of or the recipient is under trace of this, is following is aware of this tension and finding certain things out, and Yeah, Bo Diddley is a good case because Bo Diddley's contribution to rock and roll was very. He's an outsider of an outsider form. He was not. He was not so much a blues person or an R&B person like Jerry Lee Lewis or Big Joe Turner, or he wasn't also not clearly coming from this more like country rock and roll tradition like Elvis Presley, but he was coming from a kind of a minority among African American music, and his rhythms had this clave, this clave beat, dun 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 dun, and so he had to. He came up with a complete weird character. He had these rectangular guitars. They were unbelievable objects. I don't know who made them for them, but he always working with rectangular guitars. And he had a female support group, like many male artists had, but they were not background singers, but they were the instrumentalists. And he, so there were all these kind of weird things, but then it was all about playing these monotonous riffs, and while doing that, being observable and making yourself available for punctum effects. Punctum effects that always tell the recipient that he or she has seen the real. This is the idea that you get from that, and then you liked it. And the behavior art aspect, I mean, behavior art is kind of a translation error in a way. It's the Chinese translation of performance art has been retranslated into behavior art, and at the same time there were certain things going on in Chinese avant-garde circles in the late 90s, early zeros that sympathized with this idea of behavior art, and they did things like little performances in subways, or it was a little bit like early situationism, like running around and terrorizing people with little gestures, or so this was then called behavior art. But I think it is so fitting for pop music because it's not performance art with all we know about performance art, but it's about presenting a behavior that is not meant for the stage, but it's meant for daily life. And so yeah, and it's it does not. It has no clue about if it's conformist or non-conformist, or it's just one option among them. But it could also be, which we all know that later became an option, super conformist. No? There were formats of pop music that were, after all these years of rebellion, dealing with being nice, and being conformist and being
One of the ways in the book you try, so there are a couple of adversaries to something what would be pop music. One, let's say rather on the amiable side, is John Cage, who opened up music to sounds.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, it's much less sympathetic person for you, at least, is Bruce Springsteen. So it's, in a way, it seems like I fit it down like pop music, neither Cage nor Springsteen.
Yeah, I mean, well, Cage, like you said, there's more sympathy for Cage. It's also not possible without Cage. So Cage had to have happened before pop music, because the how you call it, emancipation of noise, or of sound as sound. If pop music would have started without Cage, there would have been many little Cage characters in pop music. That didn't happen because Cage already was there, in his case, the sounds had this essential beauty. They were beauty for themselves. They were beautiful for themselves, and not because they were related to something. And a similar situation in musique concrète. Whereas, of course, the fact that sounds are always lexical and they always relate to someone who has caused them has then become the main currency for pop music. And Springsteen, I mean, one other rule I have in this book is that, like I said about the performance situation before, you always have these two options if you are performing to be the real you or to be completely playing a role. And it's key for pop music that you are in between. You are in between, but you have to play constantly with the possibility that you're either one or the other. And this is connected with the indexicality and the fact that that a recording is caused by a real body. And the big mistake that pop music can make is to believe that this indexicality has something to do with a moral or ethical honesty. That the fact that my body is objectively broadcasted or transmitted makes me a better person, a more serious, a more honest, a more rock and roll honest person. And that is authenticism. That's basically the one big enemy. And Springsteen is just a representative of that, but there are of course many more. And many of the authenticists had good reasons in the beginning. They had some ideas that were necessary corrections of something that had happened. But then they fetishized this, and they are of course supported by this construction through indexicality. But of course they're wrong. They read that falsely. No?
I mean, your book starts, and let's say the composition of it is you start with the also claims for indexicality, and then also stating that the recipient, so without recipients, users, listeners, there's no pop music without this shifting dynamic social world. But I mean, what's interesting also that the book then ends on talking also about the production side of it. So there's both recipients and producers. And what I think is interesting, I mean, you have yesterday in the workshop we had, in discussion we had, and right now in the book, I mean, Frankfurt, critical theory, Kittler, Luhmann. Interestingly enough, it is Roland Barthes with the punctum occupying kind of a central space. And now coming to the point you already said. So if the recipient of music or even producer of pop music is somehow being kind of linking, shifting, traversing, this amounts, I mean, something to what Barthes, I think, would dub bricoleur. And there's a kind of, I mean, it was interesting that in a way, I waited for the concept to come off bricoleur. You don't use it. You tell it maybe otherwise. For example, on one sense, and this would be, let's say, kind of almost what a pop music producer could do or should do. It would be not to think of, let's say, of this kind of authenticist position where there are some kind of inherent forces or whatever motivations that are morally, aesthetically, or whatever powerful by themselves. But you say, in a way, the pop music, if it has to shape the world, it must do so from its blind spot. And then you said, I mean, this is interesting, from a position of ignorance. From the position of ignorance, from the mistaken belief that it is only music. So a kind of ignorant.
Yeah, and for that in that part of that book, I'm thinking about if one can, after negating this in the beginning, if one can think of certain musical formats that work better than others. And then I come up with the category of non-teleological music that I'm kind of that's meant to describe music which from the musical systematics it is based upon does not lead to conclusions, does not need to, so basically the blues format, which was very present in the beginning, is only of limited use for this, because it has this dominant and then tonica, so it has this, it's getting to conclusions all the time. Of course, you can repeat one line, one verse after another, but there is a tradition of this non-teleological music that has basically you find a lot of it in non-European music. There are some formats that are non-teleological, that are functioning in a way that the music could go on forever. Although, of course, it never goes on forever, but from the structure, it doesn't say this needs to be finished, and there is not the European idea of a work of music being kind of representing a biography or a life. But there's also within pop music a lot of developments that try this, and I mentioned The Fall or Johnny Hooker or Suicide or Velvet Underground or others who had this, who started with, who brought that up, a form in which there is no inherent structure of finishing, needing to finish something, so yeah, and that is of course in a way I'm contradicting myself, because now I have certain musical rules that apply, but I would still argue this is only secondary. It's still secondary, although it can be read as some musical normativity, but of course it's not the only way. There are other ways. It's just something that is kind of evident that there is some kind of advantage for these formats, and they are easy to adopt, and hip hop has a lot of that, and so on. Yeah.
I come now to the penultimate point. It is on 2 times, and this is it comes rather late in a book, but I think it is implicit in a way. You said 2 times. Pop music has long since been able to compensate for the disappearance of emphatic social criticism. And then also early on, pop music is facing a shared crisis with the cultures of criticism, specifically social criticism. So this parallelism of pop music and social criticism, I mean, could you say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, it produces these semi-technical, semi-social roots through society that are, of course, not planned or predicted or anticipated by the social organization of late capitalism. Which is basically about separation and segregation and isolation. So this kind of this is either possible to articulate this as criticism, or it is it opens up for criticism. So, because of course people make experiences with that. These experiences are not necessarily politically conscious experiences, but they can connect with that, and this is something that one could have historically observed. Although, I mean, it's recently I was in a debate on history of German pop music, and the debate was about, or it was a symposium. It was like they had like two periods they were looking at: the late 60s to early 70s, and then again like the early 80s. And everyone had the prejudice that the late 60s to early 70s were political, and in the early 80s were depoliticized. But it was, of course, the opposite. There's not one political song by any German pop music from the late 60s to early 70s, except for Tonsteine Scherben. They are the only ones. And then there's this one kind of didactic theater collective, Flot de Cologne. And the rest of them is about mysticism and Hermann Hesse and whatever, unpolitical. And on the other hand, all these new German new wave bands, they all were singing about the RAF and about neo-fascism, and they were highly political. So I think the way the social criticism finds an outlet in pop music is not just there's no mechanism of this, what I called earlier the semi-social, semi-technical matrix behind it, but and it's also not can also not just be deducted from the political atmosphere around. It's not totally opaque, but the connections are more difficult and be less predictable than normally thought of. And of course the standard reading of politicized pop music is always people saying, yeah, these young people have no perspective, so they become aggressive, so they do criticism. But it doesn't work like that.
I will end up with a question that I sensed, again, this is abbreviated book, encyclopedia in a way. So if pop music is on one limit framed by music, let's say, so-called old music, music in a classical notion, whatever, just music. Then for the other limit case, you say that pop music in a way has become generalized into something that you call pop culture.
Yeah.
And that you are not sure that that pop music in a way is transportable or is translatable or maybe is even compatible with something you call pop culture.
Yeah, this is thank you for bringing that up. I mean, when I'm comparing pop music with music, I'm not only comparing it with classical European composition. It's for me also different from folk, from Schlager, from all these formats in which where the melody or the musical elements are transportable, and you can just where it doesn't matter who is singing it, as long as the person is singing it properly. That is the other form. The pop music is the one in which it's important who is singing it, more important than what the person is singing. So and this other quality, this quality of the person, this attractiveness of the physical person with her or his body, has been for a while. It has been the main value, the main advantage, product advantage of pop music that no one else had to offer, and of course reality TV has adopted that. Reality TV also around pop music, organized around pop music, like contests and so on, had taken over the idea that if a person does something involuntarily, that's very attractive, and this is an idea that has first been the thing about pop music. So this is what I call pop culture. This whole the valuation of the involuntarily produced attraction, and that is, of course, that is now, the production of that is different from what I called pop music earlier. It is not doing something around these moments of punctum, so that the possibility of a punctum moment is more likely, but it's like forced, aggressive production, like basically driving people to tears. Driving people to tears works, yeah. So this is it's about a similar form of attraction, but its production is completely different, or not completely different. It's industrialized and brutalized, and it's also, and it is not. I mean, the costume of music that pop music has, this costume, this dress, pop music is like dressing up these behavior components with music. This doesn't happen there. In reality TV, people are more or less naked. No? They cannot, they have not the dignity of a song around them. And that's the other difference. And yeah, and that I call pop culture. And of course, a lot of pop music has migrated into that culture.
Okay, before we open up now the floor for your questions, provocations, commentaries, it was easy for Hegel, you know, I mean, for Hegel it was obvious. So there were three other Stellungen zur Objektivität. Then he was, of course, the ultimate one. He needed no think whether something else will come. I think, I mean, that especially, I mean, the ending of your book opens up. I mean, just also in relation to the thing whether pop music, as you have described it, as this kind of complex, yeah, it is socio-anthropological, affective complex, whether it could be transforming, and also, I mean, you use at the very end something also now fitting to the context of us here now in Skopje, where there's a Pride Week. You said emphatically at the very last pages, art must become queer. So this kind of a queering of this. Okay, so this is maybe something.
Can you repeat? There was sound.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the quote?
So the quote, Diedrich says, art must become queer. This is one of the ultimate statements of the book. So I'm very hopeful that we'll have elaborations on that. And with that, I open now the floor to you.
But you want me to say something about that first?
Oh,
Yeah.
you could. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically saying that there is in this high valuation of indexicality in the matrix of pop music, there is the opportunity to step out of to become visible without articulating verbally something. You become visible as something or as someone, and you do not have to explain this, or you probably can't even explain it or name it, label it, and I think that is but you are self-confident about it. You have to be, and that I think is kind of a initial situation of queerness, and of course it has the countless examples in which this has happened in pop music, but of course also in order to be named queer, there had to be a cultural background that would understand that, no? That and now it is no longer. Now it is kind of. It went back to the, or not back. It is now captured by language. Now language can. Now there is a language for queerness that is. I mean, when I say queer, I'm not only saying queer in a contemporary sense, but in the sense that Douglas Crimp talks about queer before gay. And queer before gay in his language means that there's that there were queer art and queer acts before there was a politicized gay culture, which of course begins for Stonewall for him. So, and I think this aspect is one that you have in pop music strongly. Mm-hmm. And of course, the normative component that you had, that you were quoting, yeah, in a way that's something I can sign. But on the other hand, I wouldn't put a gun to a person who's to tell them how to do that. I wouldn't know how to do that.
Conceptual art.
I mean, also, of course, in many of these values of indexical art that I'm describing in relation to pop music have been adopted quite early on by underground film, so I think if you look at Jack Smith or Piero Hediccia or Ron Rice, these people have in the early 60s, or Kenneth Anger, have adopted the aesthetic values, Kenneth Anger even the music. So this has, of course, touched other people in the arts. So there is a lot of pop music sensitivity that had traveled around the world through visual arts without being directly connected to the production model of pop music that I was talking about. But where just the type of attraction were similar. And so it's no surprise that, I mean, there's this thing that I'm love to quote Helmut Färber, who is a German film critic from still around, but who in 1964 witnessed how Jonas Mekas arrived in Munich to a film festival, bringing Barbara Rubin, Jack Smith, and other underground filmmakers from New York from that time, and Helmut Färber is like this Frankfurt School super Adorno believer, goes there, and to him, like the furthest, most advanced thing in art is Beckett and maybe Cage. So Beckett and Cage are this is, and so he looked at these people, these underground filmmakers, and he said, yeah, this is all what they have was sexuality, and he doesn't say queerness, but he means queerness. This is so weird, this is so strange. I mean, this is definitely not emancipatory. They are not like Beckett, they are like Beckett characters. And that is exactly I think, a good point. Again, not to be understood negatively, but positively. The Beckett figures leave the Beckett factory and become subjects and start doing something. That is basically the situation also of Lou Reed's song Rock and Roll. You leave a completely dull life in which you are a Beckett character, and you find just a technical medium that transmits your body, and that's all. And this is a way out. And then people do all kinds of things with that. And one of them is queerness, one of them is politicization, and one of them is commercial success, and all these things mixed as well. But first, it's like there is just a technological way out of a socially closed situation, the socially closed situation of the late 50s, early 60s.
Thank you. Well, okay, we are too close.
Really?
Thank you, Diedrich.
Already?
Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.